I was at this quiet lounge last night, and I saw something that really stuck with me. There was this couple at a corner table, and they weren't, looking at the menu or talking. They were performing what I can only describe as a digital autopsy.
A digital autopsy. That's a powerful way to put it.
It really was. The woman was holding his phone, and her thumb was just flicking across the screen with this cold precision, like a forensic investigator. She was scrolling through his Instagram likes from months back.
Not looking for anything specific, I'm guessing?
No, exactly. Not a smoking gun, not a secret message. She was looking for a pattern. And the man, he just sat there with this really peculiar, almost self-assured posture. He looked like he'd already won whatever argument they were having.
He felt he was in the clear.
Totally. He kept whispering, "See, I have nothing to hide." And he had this smile that suggested, that total transparency was his ultimate romantic gift. He genuinely believed that by surrendering his digital keys, by giving up his data sovereignty, he was building this fortress of trust.
Right. To him, it was the logical fix for her anxiety.
It was, but then I saw the shift. She finished her audit, handed the phone back, and the tension didn't just evaporate. It didn't end in a hug. Instead, this strange shadow of indifference just crossed her face. The security he thought he was providing had somehow morphed into something else entirely. It was a subtle, almost instinctive loss of interest. It was as if by proving he was completely auditable, totally harmless, and perfectly predictable, he had accidentally signaled that his value was no longer worth the hunt.
Wow.
And that moment in the lounge, it wasn't just a petty lover's spat, it was a collision between a million-year-old biological algorithm and, a 2025 data stream. Yeah. We tell ourselves we're fighting for honesty and boundaries, but deep down, our Stone Age brains are reacting to these digital footprints as if they are direct threats to our evolutionary survival.
And that's the core of what we're getting into today, isn't it? This profound evolutionary mismatch.
It has to be. Why does the very transparency we demand so often end up killing the attraction we're trying to save? And why is a simple like on a photo triggering a prehistoric alarm that your rational mind just can't seem to turn off? To understand the chaos in our relationships today, I think we have to look at the biological truth behind the digital footprint.
That opening story it perfectly captures the conflict of this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
Our biology is, it's hardwired for a certain amount of vigilance in relationships. It had to be for survival, for pair bonding.
Sure, that makes sense.
But the sheer volume and the ambiguity of all this digital data, it transforms that necessary vigilance into something almost pathological. It just completely overwhelms our ancient systems.
Okay, so let's unpack that mechanism a bit. Evolutionary psychology suggests that jealousy is a design feature, not a bug. It's meant to keep relationships secure. It's an adaptive strategy.
Correct.
But then why is the modern expression of it so destructive? If a phone isn't a real physical threat, why doesn't our rational brain just override that evolutionary alarm?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Jealousy, at its core, is a motivational system. It's for mate retention. It mobilizes behaviors to prevent the loss of, reproductive opportunities or resources.
So if you see a rival, your brain says, act now.
Exactly. When the cues are clear, let's say you witness a blatant overture from a rival, the response is direct. It's focused. But the smartphone, it introduces this constant, ambiguous source of potential threat. It's like having a smoke detector that goes off every 3 minutes, even when there's no fire.
And you're biologically wired to respond every single time.
Every single time.
Yeah.
You have to check.
Yeah.
But you can never definitively locate the threat, so the anxiety never resolves.
Oh, it's not just that the phone exists, it's that it creates this pervasive, low-level signal of a threat that just never goes away.
Precisely. And we see this documented so vividly in qualitative studies on smartphone overuse in marriage. Constant digital activity, it fundamentally alters the relationship dynamic. It turns the phone itself into a kind of modern rival that threatens the pair bond.
A rival for attention.
For attention, for emotional energy, for time. Participants in these studies, they repeatedly emphasize that this excessive smartphone use fosters these profound feelings of neglect and suspicion.
The study used that devastating phrase, loneliness within marriage. It just paints this picture of partners sitting right next to each other, but existing in completely separate universes.
And that paradox of digital connectedness leading to relational disconnection is one of the most salient findings. One spouse recounted this feeling of profound abandonment. She said, "He is sitting beside me, but his mind is inside the phone. It feels like we live in different worlds."
Wow. So the physical presence becomes meaningless.
It's completely meaningless when the cognitive and emotional attention is somewhere else. And this sense of invisibility, it means that crucial emotional needs, like validation, simple recognition, they go chronically unmet. The brain, our old brain, registers this consistent withdrawal of attention as emotional abandonment.
And emotional abandonment triggers that evolutionary alarm just as effectively as physical infidelity would, because it's signaling a diminished investment in the partnership.
That is the key evolutionary link right there. The biological alarm isn't just guarding against sexual infidelity, it's guarding against the draining of relational resources. When a partner consistently redirects attention, affection, and time toward their smartphone, the subconscious brain interprets the phone or whoever is on the other side of that screen as a rival that's drawing away vital resources needed for the pair bond's success.
Can you give us a really concrete example from the sources of how that ambiguity fuels suspicion?
Absolutely. There's a perfect one. Consider the wife who reported this intense suspicion whenever her husband kept laughing at messages from his female colleagues. Now, she wasn't immediately concerned about sex. Her interpretation was focused entirely on the emotional withdrawal. She articulated her fear by saying, "He doesn't enjoy my company anymore." The laughter at a hidden screen was a clear sign of joy and engagement being experienced outside the shared bubble of their relationship.
It's a direct signal of diminished emotional investment in her.
Exactly. And the lack of clarity. Who is he texting? What's the joke? That ambiguity makes the threat impossible to dismiss. The mind just rushes to fill in the blanks.
And that ambiguity must contribute to just significant emotional and cognitive strain. It's like your nervous system is constantly activated.
It creates a state of perpetual hypervigilance. It really amounts to a chronic low-grade anxiety. And this is so evident in the cognitive strain reported by the participants. Many described feeling profoundly restless, anxious, when they were separated from their devices.
Like a withdrawal.
A literal withdrawal. They noted palpable stress, like feeling nervous and unable to focus when their phone battery dropped low. This fear of missing out, or FOMO, it's not benign. It's a persistent tension that contaminates the entire emotional atmosphere of the relationship.
And that constant reliance on the phone, it also seems to fuel mood dysregulation. People having quicker tempers, more frustration.
Precisely. The phone creates these little friction points that destabilize mood constantly. Partners become intensely frustrated when their attempts at meaningful dialogue get interrupted. One participant recounted, "Whenever I want to discuss something serious, he gets distracted by a notification and I lose my temper immediately."
And that creates a horrible feedback loop.
A frustrating one, yeah. The need for connection is interrupted by the device, which causes anger, which then escalates the original conflict, making the next attempt at communication even more fraught with tension. The phone literally poisons the emotional well-being of the couple.
So let's follow that path of structural damage. Beyond the emotional hit, how does this constant distraction erode the basic mechanics of intimate communication?
It ravages it. Communication is destroyed through chronic distracted listening. Spouses reported during these one-sided conversations where they felt like they were talking to a wall. A husband shared, "I am talking, but she only says, uh-huh," while typing a message. It's not real listening.
Not the presence.
No. And this isn't just rude. It leads to frequent and totally avoidable misunderstandings because the context, the nuance of the conversation is just completely missed. And then the avoidance of deep dialogue becomes a strategy. Why would you bother starting an important conversation if you know it's just going to be interrupted in 30 seconds?
And the physical pair bond, evolutionarily, that has to be essential for security and retention. That must take a hit too.
Absolutely essential, and it's directly impacted. Excessive smartphone use consistently interferes with intimacy, especially during those crucial bonding moments like at bedtime. This is a nearly universal complaint in the research.
I'm not surprised.
Reduced eye contact, less affection, and just fewer opportunities for sexual closeness. One husband lamented, "We go to bed together, but she spends an hour on Instagram before sleeping. By then, the mood is gone." The technological activity just displaces the time and the emotional space you need for sexual and emotional connection. It causes a clear decline in the structural health of the relationship.
This all brings us back to trust, which was the whole goal for the man in our opening story, total transparency to build trust. But the research suggests that secrecy, regardless of what's being hidden, is the real trust killer here.
That's such a critical finding.
Yeah.
Password secrecy, hidden screens, tilting the phone away from you, all of it generates this deep, corrosive suspicion. One respondent noted, "She always hides her screen and I start doubting her honesty. Even if it's harmless, it hurts."
Because the act of hiding is the message.
Precisely. Trust is built on openness and predictability in relational behavior. But the very act of hiding, even if the content is completely innocuous, it signals a lack of openness. It reinforces the perception of distance and invites your mind to fill in the gaps with the worst-case scenarios. Research consistently shows that jealousy thrives in situations of uncertainty and limited transparency.
Okay, so our Stone Age brain is firing wildly because of constant ambiguous digital threats, and the smartphone is just accelerating all this relational distress.
Let's pivot a little. Let's look at how technology isn't just disrupting established relationships, but fundamentally redesigning how new ones are even formed.
Right. Through the algorithmic bias in the sexual marketplace.
We're moving from biology to economics.
This is where the story gets really, really complex, because now we're introducing the mechanism that quantifies and calculates human value. But it's vital to reiterate a foundational idea here. Mating is the bedrock of all social orders. How men and women pair up and reproduce is what shapes culture, politics, and economics. It's that fundamental. And that whole process is now governed by both our immutable genetic components, our hardwired drives, and what you'd call the mimetic components.
Yes, the space of ideas, cultural trends, and most powerfully today, the algorithmic design that dictates who even gets to see whom.
So our desires are ancient, but the rules of the game are brand new.
Completely new. Civilization, and now digital technology, has overlaid entirely new rules on how those desires get satisfied. We're acting on ideas that are disseminated by platforms that, you have to remember, do not prioritize our happiness or our biological success. They prioritize their revenue stream.
That distinction is so crucial. Dating platforms aren't just benevolent matchmakers. They have a profit motive that fundamentally conflicts with the user's ultimate goal.
It's a total conflict. The primary goal of these platforms, as studies have shown again and again, is to maximize revenue and user engagement. That's measured in clicks, likes, messages sent. It is not measured in successful long-term matches.
The platform wants you perpetually swiping. You want to find a partner and delete the app.
Exactly. This creates what you could call an engineered market inefficiency.
And this inherent conflict, it leads directly to the core structural issue of this digital marketplace, the popularity bias.
Indeed. The algorithms are structurally biased toward recommending users who are already popular or have a high attractiveness score. Researchers have analyzed these huge troves of data from major dating platforms, and they've confirmed it. A user's likelihood of being recommended increases dramatically as their average perceived attractiveness score goes up.
So the algorithm isn't a neutral introduction agent. It's a system designed to concentrate attention on the people who are already successful, ensuring the highest engagement for the platform.
That's right. The popularity bias is an economic imperative for them. Highly popular users, they function almost like content creators. They're the anchors of the entire system. They generate more overall revenue by boosting the engagement of thousands of other users who hope to match with them.
So it concentrates opportunity and visibility at the very top. It creates an attention oligopoly.
That's the perfect term for it. An attention oligopoly, where the most desirable partners are just continuously recycled and prioritized, which reinforces the existing hierarchy of the sexual marketplace.
That sounds like a really powerful feedback loop that just exacerbates inequality. The attractive or popular users get more recommendations, which boosts their visibility, which the algorithm reads as success, leading to even more recommendations. It creates a kind of digital Gini coefficient for desirability.
It does. It concentrates all the opportunity in very few hands. And the research really bears out the cynicism of this model. Studies have shown that if you use unbiased recommendations, where popular and unpopular users have an equal chance of being seen, it results in significantly lower revenue and fewer total matches for the platform.
So it's a conscious design choice?
It's a design choice based on profit. As a platform matures, the shift away from maximizing user success and toward maximizing revenue becomes more and more pronounced. This popularity bias just gets stronger over time.
And this mechanism, it brings us right back to our opening anecdote, to the predictable man in the lounge. If the platform is built on quantifiable metrics, popularity, attractiveness score, response rate, then human value becomes constantly visible and auditable.
It's like having your credit score tattooed on your forehead.
Exactly. And that auditability, it kills the mystery that is so critical to sustaining interest, at least according to evolutionary theories of desire. If your value is perfectly mapped out, quantified, and reinforced through these visible metrics, it removes the necessary friction of uncertainty. It removes the risk assessment, the effort of the hunt that our evolved psychology is wired for.
So the brain is designed to value what requires investment and what carries a degree of risk. Total digital transparency, the promise of the man in the lounge, provides a risk-free audit, which paradoxically signals low value, or at least perfectly predictable value.
You become a known quantity, a perfectly predictable data point, and the reward system for the hunt is just deactivated.
Exactly. The digital design fundamentally transforms the calculus of desirability. It goes from being a complex, experiential negotiation to a visible algorithmic score. And this quantification, while it provides the transparency that modern partners say they demand, it simultaneously undermines the very evolutionary mechanism, the need for effortful mate guarding, and the thrill of the unpredictable acquisition that drives sustained attraction.
So if the dating algorithm assigns everyone a score and exposes the brutal inequality of this attention oligopoly, what happens to the men who don't like their score? They don't just quit the game, they try to hack it, or they try to build a new one altogether.
And that leads us directly to the profound ideological reaction that we see rising out of the manosphere.
We have to explore this ideological framework known as the brown pill.
We do. And it's a highly nuanced philosophy. It operates adjacent to the more well-known red pill, but it specifically blends that anti-feminist discourse with rhetoric that's centered on men of color, primarily black men. It functions as a direct reactive philosophy against the perceived instability of modern relationships and the pervasive digital scrutiny that threatens male status.
So the brown pill is an attempt to construct a very specific aspirational hegemonic masculinity in response to what they see as a gynocentric order, but it's filtered through the specific experiences of gendered racism and the social barriers that black men face.
Precisely. Proponents of the brown pill argue that while red pill rhetoric addresses the general issues of male-female dynamics, black men face unique inhibitors because of systemic racism. It makes the game, as they call it, inherently harder for them. The answer, as they see it, is to reclaim male sexual sovereignty by adopting a highly specific, high-value identity that is palatable to and successful within a white corporate capitalist structure.
And the figure most associated with pioneering this whole system was the late Kevin Samuels, often called the godfather of the brown pill. How did he systematize this sexual marketplace calculus for the masses?
Samuels provided a very public, systematic framework for quantifying human value. He often did it through these live-streamed consultations, which were predominantly focused on addressing black women. And he defined the aspirational role model as the high-value man, or HVM.
HVM.
Right. And crucially, his definition of the HVM emphasized assimilation, respectability politics, and above all, economic prowess.
And that assimilation aspect is key here, right? It's specifically tied to class identity.
It is. The HVM in this contest is explicitly defined as belonging to the business class. This is exemplified by the acronym HENRY, which stands for High Earners Not Rich Yet.
High Earners Not Rich Yet.
Exactly. This group, defined by a specific income bracket, often $100,000 to $500,000 a year, signifies financial stability and upward mobility. And this definition is an act of abnegation. It aims to redefine black excellence by rejecting those traditional black elite roles like entertainers, professional athletes, which are viewed as unstable or insufficient signifiers of lasting value within mainstream capitalism. The Henry is presented as the pragmatic, stable success story.
So the HVM is positioned as the man who succeeded within the system by playing the respectability game, and therefore he gets to set the new standards for desirability.
That's the entire ideological foundation. Samuel's content, it moved very quickly from self-improvement themes to an extreme anti-feminism. And he used this economic definition of the HVM to assess women's eligibility. He utilized what he called sexual marketplace value calculus to, frankly, humble women and compel them to adjust their expectations. He'd advise them to shed their perceived Western sensibilities, which he deemed counterproductive to securing a high-value man.
We mentioned his consultations were notorious for applying this SMV calculus. Can you detail how he delivered that analysis?
He used these public consultations almost as performance pieces. It's a PUA tactic known as negging, but on a massive scale, aimed at undermining a woman's self-esteem by challenging her perceived delusions of value. A highly circulated example is his video titled "You're Average at Best," where he critiqued a black woman, stating her looks were insufficient and her status as a mother from a previous relationship significantly lowered her SMV, making her ineligible for that HVM tier.
And what was his core advice or his premise when it came to dating and age?
He explicitly promoted the idea that black men should only seek marriage at a young age, specifically when a woman's SMV, which he defined primarily through beauty, youth, and potential fertility, was at its absolute peak. He often stated with some pretty inflammatory rhetoric that black men shouldn't have to pay for what black women do when they are young and inexperienced, essentially assigning blame to black women for their own romantic disappointments and the perceived scarcity of good black men. And this rhetoric, it quickly slides into what researchers characterize as far-right misogynoir. Samuels exhibited this unique hostility toward black women, pathologizing their digital and relationship choices and assigning blame to them for broader community challenges. His dogmatic digital practice, as it's been called, utilized these assimilationist narratives to spread this misogynoir, promoting adherence to white Western technocultural norms and aesthetics.
This ideology has found an incredibly effective digital vehicle for mass distribution, specifically through the Fresh and Fit podcast, which operates as a clear example of this brown pill spreadability. How do they leverage technology to construct and disseminate this ideology of dominance?
Fresh and Fit operates as a highly successful audio enclave. It's a self-contained content ecosystem that's intentionally removed from mainstream cultural narratives. And they construct this aspirational alpha male identity through two interconnected forms of hegemonic control, external and internal.
Okay, let's start with external hegemony. How do they encourage dominance and surveillance over partners?
External hegemony is built on asserting this multifaceted dominance over women, often through the incitement of surveillance mechanisms. They actively encourage their listeners to monitor their partner's social media accounts, to track their digital footprints, and to constrain their sexual behavior through, archaic shaming practices.
This is presented as educating men on dominion.
That's the language they use. And in their rhetoric, they often drift toward justifying violence and enforcing rigid gender roles. It aligns with elements of rape culture logic, particularly when they discuss pressures for women to dress modestly or remain subservient.
It sounds like they're attempting to rectify what they perceive as a historical deficit in masculine power, and they're leveraging technology to enforce these traditional roles.
Absolutely. They encourage listeners to assert dominance and enforce submission, and they often link their advice to rectifying perceived historical debts tied to the non-hegemonic roles that black masculinity has sometimes assumed in U.S. society. It's a quest to build an undeniable, publicly performed dominance.
And the internal hegemony, what's that about?
Internal hegemony is constructed through extreme fear-mongering, but it's tied to financial inadequacy. They emphasize that any man who lacks wealth or socioeconomic prowess is destined for subordination, not just by women, but by wealthier, higher-value men.
So it's a hierarchy of men, too.
Completely. This positions financial success as the absolute, non-negotiable requirement for high-value manhood, and at the same time, it positions women as threats that must be subdued or controlled, financially and emotionally.
Now let's talk about the spreadable nature of their content. This is where platform features like YouTube Shorts become these critical tools for disseminating this toxic ideology.
The podcast is cross-platform, but the use of YouTube Shorts in these highly edited clips is essential to their virality. Researchers define this as spreadable misogynoir, which is media content that's intentionally designed to achieve virality while simultaneously demeaning specific groups, primarily black women.
And the content is distributed in these short, potent, bite-sized formats.
Exactly. They're easily consumed, easily shared, and they transcend YouTube to become mimetic content on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. It's incredibly effective.
These clips must rely on high-energy conflict and pretty salacious titles to achieve that kind of virality.
They do. Their episode titles are specifically crafted to be provocative and high conflict. You see titles like Women Are Slowly Becoming More Masculine, or clips featuring moments where female guests who challenge the hosts are just aggressively dismissed.
Yeah, I've seen some of those clips.
The most viewed clips often showcase a host telling a female guest to get the F out after she interrupts or disagrees. This type of aggressive know-your-place rhetoric, it receives massive affirming support in the comments section. And that reinforces the group identity and promotes this far-right misogynoir across vast sections of social media. It creates a toxic technoculture where these ideas just become normalized.
So this digital scrutiny, this quantifying of value, and the resulting ideological anger, it naturally leads to the next major response we see in the manosphere, the geographical escape. This is the Passport Bros movement.
The Passport Bros movement is a clear expression of what you'd call heteropessimism. It's this performative disappointment and detachment from Western dating culture. It shares foundational beliefs with men going their own way, or MGTOW. But instead of advocating for separatism, Passport Bros seek a geographical exit from the Western dating market. It's a means to reclaim a traditional sovereign masculinity.
And the entire movement seems to be unified by a single boundary object, which is this shared, intense disdain for Western women.
That shared disdain is the social glue holding a really racially diverse group together. Western women are stereotyped universally as entitled, self-absorbed, overweight, demanding, and crucially unwilling to adopt traditional roles.
So they blame the culture.
Yes, the rhetoric often blames modern Western culture. Sometimes they'll specifically cite Sex and the City propaganda for repackaging female agency and independence in a way that, in their view, ultimately fails to provide men with the relationship stability they desire.
So these men see themselves as victims of a cultural shift that has devalued their traditional role, and that leads them to idealize women elsewhere as the solution.
Precisely. They idealize non-Western women, framing them within a specific neocolonial imagination. They're seen as submissive, traditional, and untainted by the female agency and independence that they find so threatening in the West. This movement is fundamentally an attempt to achieve the male sexual sovereignty they feel has been eroded by digital transparency and Western cultural demands.
Which destinations are highlighted, and what are they looking for specifically in those environments?
The forums frequently highlight countries like the Philippines, Thailand, Colombia, Brazil, and Russia as premium destinations. The critical factor in all of these is that they are regions where men can leverage economic disparities. They explicitly seek women who accept idealized, biologically deterministic sex roles. Males as providers, females as nurturers, and emotional support systems.
They believe American women challenge this.
They believe American women challenge this normative order because they are financially independent and culturally assertive.
Let's break down the economics here, because calling this a neocolonial transaction is a pretty profound analysis. How does that economic disparity fundamentally alter the sexual marketplace equation for the man?
This is the absolute crux of the movement's success. It is an act of neocolonial masculinity. It leverages unequal financial circumstances, often a direct legacy of colonial history and global economic disparity, to gain a disproportionate social leverage. A man earning an average U.S. salary or even a Henry salary finds that his economic value abroad translates into an immediate massive increase in his sexual marketplace value, his SMV, far beyond what he could ever achieve in the West.
So he's not just finding a better woman, in his view. He's entering a market where his primary asset, his income, is maximized. It allows him to bypass the digital scrutiny and the competition of the West.
Exactly. Some users on these forums, they openly state that men who are deemed low-ranking in the U.S. can attract women who are considered high-ranking abroad. This just confirms the movement's underlying goal: to hack the sexual marketplace by changing the environment to one where their value is maximized, often by exploiting the financial vulnerability of women in those regions.
And we have to acknowledge the racial dynamics within this geographical shift as the sources report them.
It's vital to note the internal conflicts there. The movement draws a diverse group, including significant numbers of Black, Indian, and Latinx men. And men of color utilize this movement to stake a strong claim in patriarchy by explicitly denouncing Western women with Black men on the forums, actively denouncing Black women as undesirable.
So they use this far-right misogynoir to build a kind of cross-racial solidarity.
Yes, a solidarity based on a shared disdain for modern female independence. They're seeking sovereignty by rejecting the women of their own culture who they feel are too demanding or too westernized.
So the geographical escape is the ultimate move away from the auditable, quantified, and competitive dating landscape of the West. It's a move to an environment where their economic value translates immediately into high SMV and social dominance, achieving the sexual sovereignty that digital transparency threatened.
It's an exit strategy.
Yeah.
An exit strategy for those who feel the rules of the current technological and cultural game are rigged against them. The digital marketplace exposed the reality of the attention oligopoly, and the brown pill and passport bros offer either an ideological or a physical escape route to try and regain control.
This deep dive really confirms that the digital revolution has created a profound crisis point. Digital transparency and endless connectivity, which, we often idealize as fostering perfect trust, they actually create conditions that violently clash with our evolved relational mechanisms. The digital footprint provides too many signals. It makes human value far too predictable, and it turns the pursuit of a partner from what was a rewarding hunt into a risk-free audit.
And that auditability, combined with the constant ambiguity from the omnipresent smartphone, it forces our innate jealousy mechanisms into constant hyperdrive. However, amidst all this psychological stress, the qualitative study on marital smartphone overuse, It also pointed toward a strong capacity for resilience in couples.
So it's not all doom and gloom. It seems like, despite the intensity of these digital stressors, many couples successfully implemented conscious, intentional coping strategies. They didn't just passively accept this new stressor.
Absolutely. The study identified several proactive strategies that led to resilience and relational recovery. And these were highly structured, intentional efforts. They negotiated clear boundaries, like designating screen-free times.
Enforcing mandatory tech-free zones, like the bedroom or the dinner table.
Yes. And they focused intensely on rebuilding communication through deliberate active listening, reinforcing eye contact during conversations. Little things that make a huge difference.
That structural effort sounds like a conscious attempt to perform the mate retention behaviors that actually strengthen the bond, rather than the destructive surveillance behaviors that are driven by fear.
Exactly. It's channeling the energy of mate retention constructively. One spouse noted the immediate positive feedback of these efforts. He said, "Now when she talks, I put the phone down and look at her. It makes her smile, and I feel closer." They successfully reintroduced deliberate relational investment back into the digital noise.
And I love that specific example from one participant who found balance by engaging in joint digital activities. He explained, "We watch short videos together and laugh. It turns the phone from a wall into a bridge."
That is the perfect adaptive response. It shows that constructive behaviors aimed at strengthening the pair bond and addressing insecurity through shared experience are still entirely possible. It just takes awareness and structured effort. They reframe the technology not as a divisive rival, but as a neutral medium that could be shared, turning a point of conflict into a point of connection.
The findings, at the end of the day, they underscore that the digital revolution hasn't changed what we desire: commitment, security, value. But it has fundamentally changed how we signal and perceive that value. We're forced daily to reconcile million-year-old emotional triggers with instantaneous auditable data streams. And that's leading some toward conscious adaptation and others toward ideological or geographical escape.
And if you're trying to understand the chaos, you really have to look back at the man in the lounge. You have to realize that his gift of perfect transparency was also an act of eliminating all uncertainty. And sometimes the very absence of risk is what makes a partner ultimately seem less valuable. The Stone Age brain needs something to guard, or the value calculation shifts completely.